My babysitter left my 4-year-old daughter with strangers while she went on dates and still expects me to pay her? I found out Rachel had been dumping my daughter Lily with strangers when my neighbor knocked on my door at 10 p.m. on a Tuesday. Your babysitter left Lily with us 3 hours ago, she said. Said she had an emergency. I was supposed to be at a medical conference in Dallas. Flew home immediately. Rachel had been watching Lily for 6 months, charging me $25 an hour for overnight care. I'm a single dad. My wife died when Lily was 2. Cancer took her in 4 months. Finding reliable childcare while working as an anesthesiologist was already impossible. Rachel came with perfect references. Former preschool teacher, CPR certified, ran a daycare for 3 years. She interviewed better than 12 other candidates. I thought I'd finally found someone trustworthy. The first 3 months were perfect. Lily loved her. Rachel sent updates every few hours, did craft projects, taught Lily to write her name. I paid her $3,000 a month for part-time care, plus overtime for overnight shifts when I had emergency surgeries. Never questioned the cost because Lily was safe and happy. Or so I thought. After the neighbor incident, I installed a doorbell camera without telling Rachel. Not to spy, but to see who came to my house. What I discovered made me sick. Rachel had been leaving Lily with different people since month 2. The elderly couple across the street on Mondays. The college kids 3 houses down on Wednesdays. Sometimes she'd take Lily to the park and leave her with whatever mom was there while she disappeared for hours. I pulled the footage from the past month. 17 different times Rachel left my property with Lily, returned without her, then picked her up hours later. She was getting paid $25 an hour to go on dates while strangers watched my daughter for free. The breaking point came when I checked my credit card statement. Rachel had been using my emergency card, the one I gave her for Lily's needs, at restaurants and movie theaters. $400 at a steakhouse, $80 at a wine bar, $200 at a sushi place. All during hours she was supposedly watching Lily. I called my brother Nathan, who's a family court judge, told him everything. He said to gather more evidence before confronting her. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I took a week off work and pretended to leave for another conference. Instead, I stayed at Nathan's house and followed Rachel. Day 1, she picked up Lily at 3 p.m., drove to a hair salon, and left Lily with the receptionist while she got highlights. 2 hours. She told the woman I'd approved it. Day 2, she dropped Lily at a daycare that offered drop-in services. Told them she was Lily's aunt and I was traveling. Spent 6 hours at her boyfriend's apartment. Day 3 was the worst. She left Lily at a McDonald's play place with a woman she'd just met, promising to return in 30 minutes. She was gone for 3 hours. The woman called the police, but Rachel showed up right before they arrived. Told them there'd been a miscommunication. By day 4, I had enough. I called Rachel and said I was coming home early due to a canceled surgery. Asked her to stay late so we could discuss a raise. She agreed immediately, probably already spending the money in her head. I arrived home at 8 p.m. and with Nathan and Officer Daniels, a friend from high school who worked in child services. Rachel was on my couch, scrolling through her phone while Lily slept upstairs. "Hey," she said brightly. "Lily was perfect today. We made cookies and read 5 books." "Really?" I asked. "Which books?" She rattled off titles, all lies. I knew because I'd watched her drop Lily at the library daycare at noon and leave her there until 5 p.m. "Rachel, where were you at 2 p.m. today?" Her smile flickered. "Here, playing with Lily." I pulled out my phone and showed her the timestamp from the library security footage Nathan had legally obtained. Her face went white. "I can explain." "No need." Officer Daniels stepped forward. "We have 17 documented instances of child abandonment. You left a 4-year-old with unvetted strangers while collecting payment for supervision." Rachel stood up fast. "They weren't strangers. They were neighbors and friends." "Friends whose names you don't know?" Nathan asked. "We interviewed them. You told the college students you were Lily's cousin. Told the elderly couple you were authorized to delegate care. None of them knew you were being paid." "This is ridiculous!" Rachel shouted. "I never put Lily in danger." "You left her at a McDonald's with someone you'd known for 10 minutes, I said. That woman almost called CPS. Rachel's boyfriend showed up 20 minutes later, probably expecting to pick her up for another date funded by my credit card. Instead, he found his girlfriend being arrested for child endangerment and theft. She'd stolen $3,400 over 2 months. The best part came later. I went through the credit card statements again that night after the police took Rachel away. Found the jewelry store charge. $800 at Hampton's Fine Jewelers, dated exactly 3 days after she'd abandoned Lily at that McDonald's play place for 3 hours. I pulled up the receipt details online. Men's watch, engraved. The engraving said, "Forever yours," with their anniversary date. She'd used my emergency card to buy her boyfriend a gift, while my 4-year-old daughter sat scared in a fast food restaurant with a complete stranger. My phone rang at 7 the next morning. The caller ID showed District Attorney's office. I answered on the second ring. Demetrius Kirby introduced himself and got straight to business. He had 17 documented instances of child abandonment. The theft totaled $3,400. Rachel was facing multiple felony counts: child endangerment in the first degree, fraud, identity theft for the unauthorized credit card use. He walked me through the timeline. Preliminary hearing in 2 weeks. Arraignment would follow. The whole process could take months. His voice was calm but firm. This wasn't a minor case. The vulnerability of the victim and the pattern of deception made it serious. Very serious. I called the hospital after hanging up with Demetrius, told them I needed a week off. My supervisor started to protest, then I explained why. She went quiet, said take whatever time I needed. 10 minutes later, Tobias called me. He'd already heard through the grapevine, said he'd cover my entire surgery schedule for the week. No arguments. Family came first. The hospital would manage just fine without me. His voice was kind, understanding. I felt grateful for colleagues who actually gave a damn. Lily woke up asking for Miss Rachel. I made her breakfast while trying to figure out how to explain this. She ate her cereal slowly, looking at the door every few minutes, waiting. She asked 3 more times where Miss Rachel was. Each question felt like a knife. I finally sat down across from her at the kitchen table. Miss Rachel made some bad choices, I told her. She won't be your babysitter anymore. Lily stared at me with those big eyes. Asked if Miss Rachel was coming back tomorrow. No, sweetie, not tomorrow. Not ever. But why, Daddy? The confusion on her face broke something inside me. Because she didn't take good care of you the way she was supposed to. She seemed more puzzled than upset. Didn't cry, didn't throw a fit. Just nodded slowly like she was trying to understand something too big for a 4-year-old brain. That response scared me more than tears would have. She didn't understand she'd been in danger. Couldn't comprehend that strangers shouldn't be trusted with children. The innocence was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Nathan came over that afternoon with paperwork for civil court. We were filing for restitution. The $3,400 she stole was obvious. But Nathan suggested we also seek the $6,000 I'd paid her during the 2 months she was actively abandoning Lily. She hadn't provided the service I'd paid for. Legally, we had grounds. We sat at my dining room table filling out forms while Lily played with blocks in the living room. Nathan explained the process carefully. Criminal case would proceed separately. This was about getting my money back, making her financially accountable even if the criminal penalties weren't enough. The doorbell rang around 4. I opened it to find Sheila standing there with a plate of chocolate chip cookies covered in plastic wrap. Her eyes were red. She'd been crying. She started apologizing before I could even say hello. She had no idea Rachel was being paid to watch Lily. Thought Rachel was Lily's aunt doing a family favor. The words tumbled out fast. She felt terrible. Absolutely terrible. Had she known Rachel was a paid babysitter dumping Lily with neighbors, she would have called me immediately. Would have reported it. The guilt in her voice was real and heavy. I invited her inside, told her she did nothing wrong. She'd actually kept Lily safe when Rachel abandoned her. That mattered. Sheila sat on my couch wringing her hands. Said she should have questioned it more, should have asked for my phone number, should have done something. I reassured her again. She was manipulated just like everyone else. Rachel was good at lying. Sheila finally looked up at me. Asked if she could be an emergency backup contact going forward. Said she'd be honored to help however she could. Her grandmotherly kindness felt genuine, real. I accepted. Gave her my cell number. Told her I'd probably take her up on that offer soon. The college students showed up the next day. 2 19-year-old kids who looked absolutely mortified. They stood on my porch apologizing over each other. Had no idea Rachel was being paid. Thought they were helping out a stressed single mom. One of them, a girl with blonde hair and a ponytail, said Rachel had told them I was a struggling teacher working 2 jobs. The other one, a tall guy with a backpack, said Rachel claimed she was helping me out for free as a favor. Their shock seemed completely real. They'd been manipulated too. Used. I told them what I'd told Sheila. They weren't at fault. Rachel was skilled at deception. They left looking relieved but still guilty. I spent the next 3 days on the phone, called 12 different babysitting agencies, requested applications from 6 candidates. This time I verified everything personally, called every single reference myself, asked detailed questions. How long did they know the candidate? What specific situations had they observed? Would they trust this person with their own children? Rachel's references had been real. I'd just never called them. Trusted the agency's vetting process. Big mistake. Huge mistake. I wasn't making that error again. Nathan stopped by on the 3rd day, brought coffee and a business card, said I should consult with a child psychologist. Assess whether Lily showed signs of trauma from the abandonment experiences. He gave me the name Catalina Mercer. She specialized in early childhood, had testified in family court cases before. Nathan knew her professionally, said she was excellent, patient, good with kids who'd experienced instability. I took the card, stared at it. The thought of Lily needing therapy because of my failure to protect her made me sick. But Nathan was right. I needed to know if this had damaged her, needed to help her process whatever she was feeling. I called Catalina's office that afternoon and scheduled an appointment for the following week. Catalina's office sat on the second floor of a professional building near the hospital. I parked and unbuckled Lily from her car seat, watching her clutch her stuffed rabbit against her chest. She'd been quiet during the drive. Not upset, just thoughtful in that way 4-year-olds get when they sense something important is happening. The waiting room had soft chairs and a fish tank built into the wall. Lily pressed her nose against the glass, tracking a yellow fish as it swam past fake coral. A door opened and Catalina stepped out. She wore jeans and a cardigan, not the formal clothes I'd expected from a therapist. Her smile reached her eyes. She crouched down to Lily's level and introduced herself without the fake cheerfulness adults sometimes use with kids. Just calm and friendly. Lily looked at me for permission. I nodded. Catalina led us into her office, and I understood immediately why Nathan had recommended her. The space felt warm without being childish. Bookshelves lined one wall, filled with picture books and toys organized in clear bins. A small table sat in the corner with art supplies. A couch faced 2 armchairs, and Catalina gestured for me to take one while she sat on the floor near Lily. She pulled out a bin of blocks and started building a tower, not asking Lily to join, just playing. Lily watched for maybe 30 seconds before sitting down and adding her own blocks. I stayed in the armchair, trying to look relaxed while my stomach twisted. Catalina built and talked, asking simple questions about Lily's favorite colors and foods. Nothing heavy, just conversation. Then she asked what Lily liked to do during the day. Lily explained about coloring and playing outside. Catalina asked who she played with. Lily listed names I didn't recognize. Kids from the park, probably. Kids she'd met while Rachel was supposed to be watching her. Catalina asked about the people who watched her when I was at work. Lily's answer came easily, listing off descriptions. The nice lady with the cat, the college kids with the video games, the grandma who made cookies. My chest tightened hearing her recite the roster of strangers who'd been responsible for her safety. Catalina kept her tone light, asking which person Lily liked best. Lily thought about it seriously, then said the grandma because of the cookies. Catalina smiled and asked if Lily knew all their names. Lily shook her head, said she just called them the nice people. The hour passed faster than I expected. Catalina suggested I wait outside for the last 15 minutes so she and Lily could play alone. I hesitated but agreed. Sat in the waiting room watching the fish swim in circles, wondering what Lily was saying without me there. When the door opened, Lily ran out holding a drawing she'd made. Catalina asked if I could stay for a few minutes to talk. We sat in her office while Lily colored at the small table. Catalina spoke quietly, saying Lily seemed remarkably well-adjusted overall. Bright and social, no obvious signs of trauma, but she'd noticed some confusion when they talked about who should watch children. Lily thought any adult who was nice could be a babysitter. Didn't understand the difference between family, hired caregivers, and strangers. She'd also mentioned being left places without much concern, like it was normal. Catalina recommended 3 more sessions to help Lily process the changes and understand better boundaries. Help her recognize what appropriate adult behavior looked like. I agreed immediately, asked if there was anything I should be doing differently at home. Catalina said to keep routines consistent and predictable. Let Lily know exactly when I'd be back whenever I left. Follow through every single time. Predictability would rebuild her sense of security. We scheduled the next appointment for the following week. Lily chattered about the fish tank on the drive home, already asking when we could visit Catalina again. I felt lighter than I had in days. She wasn't damaged. Rachel hadn't broken something fundamental in my daughter. We could fix this. 2 weeks after Rachel's arrest, Nathan and I walked into the courthouse for her preliminary hearing. The building smelled like floor wax and old wood. We passed through security and found the right courtroom on the 3rd floor. Rachel sat at the defense table with her lawyer, a middle-aged man in an expensive suit. She'd lost weight. Her face looked drawn, hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She didn't look at me when we entered. The judge came in and everyone stood. He was older, probably close to retirement, with reading glasses hanging on a chain around his neck. The proceedings started with Rachel's lawyer making his argument. His client wasn't a flight risk. She had strong community ties, family in the area, no prior criminal record. He painted her as a young woman who'd made poor choices under financial stress, not a danger to society. Asked for reduced bail so she could await trial at home. The prosecutor stood up. She was younger than I expected, maybe 30, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense voice. She laid out the charges methodically. 17 documented instances of child abandonment, theft of $3,400, use of a credit card without authorization, pattern of deception spanning months. She emphasized the vulnerability of the victim. A 4-year-old child left with unvetted strangers while the defendant collected payment for supervision she wasn't providing. The judge listened without expression, asked a few questions about the evidence. The prosecutor mentioned the McDonald's incident specifically. A stranger had called police when Rachel failed to return for 3 hours. The woman who'd been left with Lily had no idea who Rachel was, no contact information, nothing. The judge's eyebrows went up at that. He asked Rachel's lawyer if he had a response. The lawyer tried to minimize it, calling it an isolated incident blown out of proportion. The judge cut him off, said leaving a 4-year-old with a stranger in a public place for 3 hours wasn't an isolated incident. It was criminal negligence. He denied the bail reduction, said Rachel would remain in custody until trial given the nature of the charges and the vulnerability of the victim. Rachel's face crumpled. Her lawyer put a hand on her shoulder, but she shook it off. We filed out of the courtroom and Nathan squeezed my shoulder in the hallway. Said it went as well as we could have hoped. The prosecutor caught up with us near the elevators, introduced herself properly and said she'd be in touch as the case developed. Asked if I'd be willing to testify if it went to trial. I said yes without hesitation. The reporter called 3 days later. I was at work, between surgeries, when my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. She identified herself as working for the local news station, said she'd seen the court records for Rachel's case and wanted to interview me about the charges. I felt my stomach drop, asked how she'd gotten my number. She said it was public information from the police report. I told her I wasn't interested in being interviewed, wanted to protect Lily's privacy. She pushed a little, saying the public had a right to know about childcare fraud in the community. I stayed firm, said no. She thanked me for my time and hung up. The story ran 2 days later anyway. I saw it on the evening news while making dinner. They showed the courthouse, used Rachel's booking photo, detailed the charges from public documents, mentioned she'd worked as a babysitter for multiple families, didn't name me or Lily, but included enough details that anyone who knew us could figure it out. My phone started ringing that night. Friends from the hospital asking if I was okay. Neighbors wanting to know if the news story was about Rachel. I kept the answers short. Yes, it was her. No, I didn't want to talk about it. Lily was fine. We were handling it. The news coverage had an unexpected effect. Officer Daniels called me 4 days after the story aired, said 3 more parents had contacted the police with concerns about Rachel's previous employment. Apparently, she'd worked for 2 other families before me. Both had experienced similar situations where Rachel claimed emergencies and left suddenly. One family had even fired her for unexplained absences, but never reported it formally. Rachel had told them she had medical issues and they'd felt sorry for her. Believed her lies just like I had. Officer Daniels said he was investigating these new complaints, asked if I'd be willing to meet with the other families. I agreed. We met at a coffee shop the following Saturday. 2 couples, both looking tired and guilty. The first family had employed Rachel about 8 months before me. They'd started noticing gaps in her availability, times when she'd say she was watching their son, but they'd get calls from daycares or neighbors asking about pickup times. They'd confronted her and she'd cried, said she was dealing with family medical emergencies. They'd let her go but hadn't pursued it further. The second family had similar experiences. Rachel would leave their daughter with various people, always with elaborate excuses. They'd discovered it when their daughter mentioned the nice librarian who watched her every Tuesday. They'd called the library and learned Rachel had been dropping their daughter at the children's section for hours at a time. They'd fired her immediately, but Rachel had begged them not to report her, said she'd lose her childcare license. They'd agreed, thinking they were being kind. We compared notes for over an hour. The patterns were identical. Rachel would start out perfect, then gradually begin delegating care to others while collecting full payment. She was skilled at manipulation, at making people feel sorry for her or trust her completely. By the time we left the coffee shop, I felt less alone in my failure to catch her sooner. These were smart, careful parents who'd been fooled the same way I had. Officer Daniels compiled all the new information into a supplemental report, called me a week later to say the evidence was even stronger than before. Rachel had been running this scheme for at least 18 months across 3 families. The pattern was clear and well documented. He'd forwarded everything to the district attorney. Demetrius called me the next day, said Rachel's lawyer had reached out about a plea deal. They were realizing a jury would likely convict on all counts given the pattern of behavior across multiple families. The evidence was too strong, too consistent. Rachel's lawyer wanted to negotiate before it went to trial. Demetrius asked how I felt about that. I didn't know. Part of me wanted her to face a jury, to have 12 people hear what she'd done and judge her for it. But trials were long and unpredictable. A plea deal would guarantee consequences. I told Demetrius I'd think about it. He said to take my time. We had months before any trial would start. I spent the next 2 weeks interviewing new babysitters, posted ads on 3 different websites, contacted 2 agencies, asked for recommendations from the hospital colleagues, got 23 responses, narrowed it down to 5 candidates worth meeting. This time I did everything differently. Called every single reference personally, asked detailed questions about reliability and judgment. Ran background checks through 2 separate services. Required 3 professional references and 2 personal ones. Set up interviews at my house so I could see how they interacted with Lily in her own environment. The first candidate was young, maybe 23, with energy that exhausted me just watching. She played enthusiastically with Lily, but checked her phone twice during the hour-long interview. Crossed her off the list. The second was a nursing student who needed flexible hours. Sweet but distracted, already talking about her class schedule and how she'd need to adjust pickup times. Not reliable enough. The third had great references, but something felt off. She asked too many questions about my work schedule, my income, whether I traveled often. Made me uncomfortable. The fourth seemed perfect on paper, but showed up 20 minutes late to the interview. Said traffic had been bad. Maybe true, but I needed someone who planned ahead and arrived early, not someone who cut timing close. The fifth was Ailsa. She arrived 15 minutes early, waited in her car until the appointment time, then knocked exactly on schedule. Wore comfortable clothes suitable for playing with kids. Brought a small bag with a children's book and some simple craft supplies, explaining she liked to come prepared but wanted to see what Lily already enjoyed before assuming anything. She was maybe 60, with gray hair and laugh lines around her eyes. Retired elementary school teacher who'd spent 30 years with second graders. Started babysitting after her own grandchildren moved to another state with their parents. She missed having kids around. Ailsa sat on the floor with Lily and pulled out the book, asking if Lily wanted to read together, or if she'd rather show Ailsa her favorite toys. Lily chose toys, bringing out her blocks and dolls. Ailsa followed Lily's lead, letting her direct the play while making gentle suggestions that extended the game. She never checked her phone, never seemed impatient or distracted, just completely present with my daughter. I watched through the doorbell camera I'd kept installed, seeing how Ailsa moved through my house. She asked Lily permission before opening cabinets or drawers, checked with me before giving Lily a snack. Took notes about Lily's routines and preferences, asking detailed questions about nap schedules and meal requirements. Her references were outstanding. I called all 5. 2 were parents whose children she'd babysat for years. They couldn't say enough good things. Reliable, trustworthy, patient, creative. One parent said Ailsa had stayed overnight when their daughter had the flu and they needed to work, refusing extra payment because she wanted to help. The other 3 references were former teaching colleagues who'd worked with Ailsa for decades. They described her as the teacher every parent requested, the one who made kids feel safe and excited about learning. I hired Ailsa for a trial month at the same rate I'd paid Rachel. $25 an hour felt steep, but I wasn't cutting corners anymore. Not after everything. She started the following Monday, and I set up monitoring systems I should have installed from day 1. The doorbell camera stayed active. I added motion sensors in key rooms. My phone received alerts whenever someone entered or left the house. Ailsa knew about all of it. I'd explained during her final interview that I needed complete transparency after what happened, and she'd nodded without hesitation. Said she understood completely, and would have done the same thing in my position. Her first text arrived at 9:15 that morning, 15 minutes after I left for the hospital. Just checking in. Lily ate her whole waffle and we're reading The Very Hungry Caterpillar now. She included a photo of Lily sitting cross-legged on the living room floor, book open in her lap, completely absorbed. 2 hours later, another update. We made Play-Doh from scratch. Lily says it's squishy and perfect. Another photo showed Lily's hands covered in blue dough, grinning at the camera. I hadn't asked for any of this. Rachel used to send updates too, but only after I prompted her, and they were always vague. Lily's great, or we're having fun. Ailsa's messages felt different, specific, real, detailed enough that I could picture exactly what my daughter was doing at any given moment. She sent 4 updates that first day without me requesting a single one. Each included photos that proved Lily was actually with her, actually engaged in the activities she described. No more wondering if my daughter was sitting in a stranger's house while her caregiver lived a separate life on my dime. Lily took 3 days to warm up to Ailsa. The first afternoon, she clung to my leg when I tried to leave, something she'd never done with Rachel. Made my chest tight, but Catalina had warned me this might happen. Said Lily's trust had been damaged even if she couldn't articulate why. Ailsa handled it perfectly. Knelt down to Lily's level and asked what her favorite stuffed animal was. Lily pointed at the worn rabbit she'd had since birth. Ailsa suggested they make the rabbit a bed out of a shoebox and old fabric scraps. By the time I checked the camera feed 20 minutes later, Lily was showing Ailsa her entire stuffed animal collection, explaining each one's name and personality. The wariness remained, though. Lily watched Ailsa constantly those first few days, tracking her movements around the house. If Ailsa left the room, Lily followed. If Ailsa went to the bathroom, Lily waited outside the door. Catalina said this hypervigilance was actually healthy. Showed Lily was learning to monitor adult behavior, developing appropriate caution. She'd been too trusting with Rachel, accepting every explanation without question. Now she was learning that adults could lie, that she needed to pay attention. Rachel's boyfriend tried calling Nathan's office on Thursday. Nathan's assistant forwarded me a message. Guy claimed he had no idea what Rachel had been doing, wanted to apologize personally, needed to explain himself. Nathan called me between court sessions. His voice was firm when he told me not to respond. Anything I said could complicate the criminal case. The boyfriend might be genuine, or he might be gathering information for Rachel's defense. Either way, engaging with him was a bad idea. I listened to Nathan's advice and deleted the message. 2 days later, Nathan forwarded me a letter. The boyfriend had sent it through proper channels this time, addressed to Nathan's office with a request to pass it along. I opened it Saturday morning while Lily played with Ailsa in the backyard. The letter was 3 pages, handwritten on lined notebook paper. He explained he'd met Rachel 4 months ago on a dating app. She'd told him she was a full-time nanny for a wealthy single father who traveled frequently for work. Said she made good money and had flexible hours. He'd never questioned it. Why would he? She always had cash for dates, never seemed stressed about bills, talked about her job like it was legitimate. The restaurants, the movies, the weekend trip to the coast, all funded by money she'd stolen from me while abandoning my daughter. He said he felt sick when the police told him the truth. Sick knowing every nice dinner had been paid for with stolen credit cards. Sick knowing Rachel had been leaving a 4-year-old with strangers while they went wine tasting. He'd broken up with her immediately, refused to visit her in jail, was cooperating fully with prosecutors as a witness to her spending patterns. The letter ended with an apology I wasn't sure how to accept. He hadn't known, but he'd benefited. Did that make him complicit? I didn't know. Folded the letter back into its envelope and stuck it in a drawer. Demetrius called the following Tuesday, asking if I could meet at his office. He had news about Rachel's case. I drove downtown during my lunch break, found parking in the courthouse garage, took the elevator to the 3rd floor. Demetrius met me in the lobby, shook my hand, led me to a small conference room with a scratch table and uncomfortable chairs. He got straight to the point. Rachel's lawyer was pushing hard for a plea deal. She'd plead guilty to child endangerment and theft charges if they dropped the identity theft charge. Recommended sentence was 2 years in county jail, followed by 5 years probation. Demetrius watched my face as he laid out the terms. Said I didn't have to agree to anything, that we could take it to trial if I wanted. But trials were unpredictable. Juries sometimes felt sympathy for defendants, especially young women without prior records. A plea deal guaranteed conviction and prison time. Guaranteed she'd have a criminal record that would follow her forever. I drove back to the hospital feeling hollow. 2 years felt like nothing compared to what she'd done. 2 years for repeatedly endangering my daughter's life, for stealing thousands of dollars, for lying to my face for months. But Nathan called that evening after I'd put Lily to bed. Reminded me that trials could go wrong in 100 different ways. Rachel's lawyer might paint her as a struggling young woman who made poor choices under financial pressure. Might convince a jury she never intended real harm. We could end up with probation only, no jail time at all. A guaranteed conviction with prison time was better than gambling on a trial. I met Tobias for coffee Thursday morning before our shifts started. Told him about the plea deal, about my struggle with whether 2 years was enough. He stirred his coffee slowly, thinking, then pointed out something I hadn't fully considered. Rachel would have a permanent criminal record. Felony child endangerment and theft. She'd never work with children again. Never pass a background check for any job involving vulnerable populations. The conviction itself was a life sentence in terms of her career options. The actual prison time mattered less than the permanent mark on her record. Other families would be protected because she'd never get the chance to do this again. I thought about it for 3 days, talked it through with Nathan twice more, reviewed the evidence we'd gathered, watched the doorbell footage again, seeing Rachel leave with Lily and return hours later alone. Remembered the McDonald's incident, the 3 hours my daughter spent with a stranger while Rachel disappeared. On Sunday evening, I called Demetrius and told him I'd accept the plea deal with 2 conditions. Rachel had to agree to pay full restitution, every penny she'd stolen, and she had to undergo mandatory psychological evaluation. I wanted someone professional to assess why she'd done this, to make sure she understood the danger she'd created. Demetrius said he'd present the terms to Rachel's lawyer. Called back Monday afternoon to say they'd agreed to everything. The plea hearing was scheduled 3 weeks out. He warned me that Rachel would probably make a statement at the hearing. Probably try to minimize what she'd done or explain it away with excuses about stress or financial problems. I needed to prepare myself to sit there and listen without reacting emotionally. The judge wouldn't appreciate outbursts and anything I said could jeopardize the plea agreement. I took Lily to her 3rd session with Catalina that Wednesday, sat in the waiting room while they worked together in the therapy office. Through the partially open door, I could hear Lily's voice as she played with dolls, making them talk to each other in high-pitched tones. One doll kept leaving and the other kept asking when she'd come back. Over and over. The leaving doll promised to return soon, then disappeared for what Lily narrated as a really long time. The waiting doll cried and asked other dolls for help. Catalina's gentle voice guided the play, asking questions about how the dolls felt, what they needed to feel safe. After the session ended and Lily went to play with toys in the corner, Catalina explained what I'd witnessed. Lily was processing abandonment anxiety through play. working through her confusion about why Rachel kept leaving and why different people kept watching her. The repetitive scenarios were her way of trying to make sense of something that didn't make sense. Adult behavior that violated the basic trust children need to feel secure. Catalina walked me through the next steps before we left her office. She pulled out a printed schedule template and started filling it in with specific times. Drop off at 8:30 every morning. Pick up at 5:15 every evening. Nap time from 1 to 3. Snack at 4. She wrote it all down in big letters and suggested I make copies for both me and Ailsa. Post one on the fridge where Lily could see it. The routine needed to become automatic, predictable as breathing. She explained that kids Lily's age understand time through patterns more than numbers on a clock. When I said I'd be back at 5:15, I needed to walk through that door at 5:15 exactly. Not 5:20, not 5:10. Exactly when I promised, every single time. If an emergency came up and I'd be late, I needed to call Ailsa and have her explain to Lily that Daddy was stuck, but would be home as soon as possible. No surprises, no unexplained absences. Every departure needed an explanation, and every return needed to match the promise. I started implementing everything that same day. Made 3 copies of the schedule at the office printer. Hung one on the fridge at Lily's eye level with colorful magnets. Gave one to Ailsa. Kept one in my wallet. When I dropped Lily off the next morning, I knelt down to her level and pointed at the clock on the wall. The big hand was on the 6 and the little hand was on the 8. I told her I'd be back when the big hand was on the 3 and the little hand was on the 5. She nodded but looked uncertain. I kissed her forehead and left exactly on schedule. That first week felt exhausting, watching the clock constantly, leaving the hospital at exactly 4:50 to make sure I hit no traffic delays. Walking through my front door at precisely 5:15 to find Lily playing with blocks and Ailsa reading nearby. Lily looked up each time with something like relief crossing her face. By the second week, the difference became obvious. Lily stopped asking me repeatedly when I'd be home. She stopped clinging to my legs during morning drop-offs. When I explained I'd be back at 5:15, she just said okay and went back to whatever she was doing. The anxiety that had been making her voice tight and her questions endless started fading. She began trusting that Ailsa would be there when she woke from her nap, that I would return when I promised, that the adults in her life would do what they said they'd do. The plea hearing arrived on a Thursday morning 3 weeks after I'd accepted the deal. Nathan met me at the courthouse at 8:45. We went through security together and found seats in the gallery. The courtroom felt cold and official with its dark wood panels and high ceiling. Other cases were scheduled before Rachel's, so we sat through 2 DUI hearings and a probation violation before her name got called. Rachel walked in wearing an orange jumpsuit with her hands cuffed in front of her. She looked smaller than I remembered, thinner. Her hair hung limp around her face, and she kept her eyes on the floor as the bailiff led her to the defense table. Her lawyer stood when the judge entered. Everyone rose. The judge was a woman in her 60s with gray hair pulled back tight and glasses on a chain around her neck. She reviewed the file for a moment before addressing the court. Rachel's lawyer confirmed his client was ready to enter a guilty plea. The judge asked Rachel to stand and state her full name for the record. Rachel's voice came out barely above a whisper. The judge asked her to speak up. She repeated her name louder. The judge went through each charge methodically. Child endangerment, theft, fraud. Asked Rachel how she pleaded to each one. Guilty, guilty, guilty. Her voice stayed flat and mechanical. When given the opportunity to make a statement, Rachel pulled out a folded piece of paper from somewhere. Her hands shook as she unfolded it. She read in that same flat voice about how sorry she was, how she never meant to put Lily in danger, how her judgment became impaired by financial stress and relationship problems, how she hoped I could forgive her someday. The words sounded rehearsed and empty. Financial stress didn't explain charging $800 at a jewelry store. Relationship problems didn't justify leaving my daughter with strangers for hours at a time. The premeditation was obvious in every documented instance. She'd planned where to leave Lily, lied to multiple people about who she was and what authority she had, spent my money deliberately on dates and personal luxuries. Nothing about her statement acknowledged the calculated nature of what she'd done. The judge let her finish reading. Then she removed her glasses and looked directly at Rachel. She spoke about the sacred trust parents place in caregivers, about how vulnerable children are and how completely they depend on adults to keep them safe. She emphasized that Rachel's actions could have resulted in Lily being kidnapped or trafficked or killed by the strangers she was left with. That pure luck was the only reason my daughter wasn't harmed, that Rachel had gambled with a child's life for her own convenience and pleasure. The judge's voice stayed calm, but her words hit hard. She accepted the plea deal but made it clear she found the sentence almost too lenient. 2 years in county jail followed by 5 years of probation. During probation, Rachel could not work with children in any capacity, could not volunteer at schools or daycares, could not babysit even for family members. Any violation would result in immediate imprisonment for the remainder of her probation term. She was also ordered to pay $9,400 in restitution at $200 per month starting after her release. The judge asked if Rachel understood all the terms. Rachel nodded and whispered yes. The bailiff led her back out through the side door. The whole proceeding took maybe 20 minutes. Nathan and I walked out of the courthouse into bright morning sunlight. I felt hollow. Justice had been served in the technical sense. Rachel would go to prison. She'd have a permanent record. She'd never work with children again. But none of that undid what she'd done. None of it erased the months she spent putting Lily at risk while I trusted her completely. None of it gave me back the peace of mind I'd lost or fixed the damage to my ability to trust caregivers. We got coffee at a shop across the street. Nathan asked how I felt and I told him I didn't know. Relief mixed with emptiness mixed with lingering anger. He said that was normal. That closure doesn't feel the way people expect it to feel. That evening I sat with Lily on her bed after Ailsa left. I explained in simple terms that Miss Rachel had made bad choices and had to go away for a while to think about what she did. Lily looked at me seriously with her big brown eyes. She asked if Miss Rachel was in timeout. I said something like that. A very long timeout. Lily nodded and said Miss Ailsa was nicer anyway. That simple statement made me smile despite everything. She was right. Ailsa was nicer, more reliable, more genuine, better with Lily in every measurable way. Over the following weeks, Ailsa continued proving herself trustworthy. I gradually relaxed my constant monitoring, stopped checking the doorbell camera footage every single day, stopped calling for updates quite so frequently. She never complained about my extensive check-ins or the visible camera or my detailed questions. She seemed to understand that rebuilding trust takes time after betrayal, that my hypervigilance wasn't about doubting her specifically, but about healing from what Rachel had done. 6 weeks after the sentencing, I received a letter forwarded through the DA's office. The return address showed a family name I didn't recognize. Inside was a thank you note from the parents Rachel had worked for before me. They explained they'd suspected something was wrong during her employment with them. She'd had too many emergencies, too many unexplained absences. Their daughter had mentioned different people watching her, but they'd dismissed it as confusion. They'd blamed themselves for being paranoid and overprotective. When they saw the news coverage of Rachel's arrest and conviction, everything clicked into place. Their instincts had been correct. Reading their letter brought an unexpected sense of validation. Knowing their concerns were justified gave them closure. Knowing my actions had confirmed what they'd suspected helped them stop second-guessing themselves. They thanked me for pressing charges and seeing it through to conviction. For protecting other families by making sure Rachel could never do this again. I wrote to Catalina a few weeks later, asking if she could do one more session with Lily. 2 months had passed since the sentencing, and I wanted to know if any damage lingered under the surface. She scheduled us for a Thursday afternoon, and I took off work early to bring Lily in. The office looked the same with its bright toys and soft chairs. Lily went straight to the dollhouse in the corner, while Catalina and I talked quietly near the door. She spent 40 minutes observing Lily through different play scenarios, asking gentle questions about school and friends and what she did when she felt scared. Lily answered easily, building elaborate stories with the dolls about families eating dinner and going to the park. Nothing seemed off in her responses or her body language. When Lily moved to the art table to draw, Catalina pulled me aside. She said Lily showed completely normal attachment patterns with me and appropriate wariness with new adults, which was exactly what we wanted to see. The early intervention had worked. Lily processed the abandonment experiences through therapy before they could settle into lasting trauma. She developed healthy boundaries and understood that some adults make bad choices, but that didn't mean all adults were unsafe. I felt relief wash through me hearing those words. Catalina added that Lily might have questions later as she got older and understood more about what happened. But for now, she was a resilient, well-adjusted 4-year-old who trusted her dad and felt secure in her daily life. I called Nathan that evening after putting Lily to bed, told him what Catalina said and how grateful I felt that we'd caught everything early enough to prevent real damage. He listened quietly and then reminded me that I needed to stop blaming myself for not discovering Rachel's lies sooner. Rachel was a skilled manipulator who'd fooled multiple families before mine. She had perfect references, a believable story, and 3 months of excellent behavior that built trust before she started abandoning Lily. I'd done everything right once I learned the truth. I'd gathered evidence methodically, involved the proper authorities, and made sure Lily got professional help immediately. That's what mattered. His words helped, but didn't completely erase the guilt I carried. I kept thinking about all those times I'd paid Rachel thinking Lily was safe when she was actually with strangers. All those hours I'd worked confident my daughter was cared for properly. The what-if still haunted me at night, even though logically I knew Nathan was right. 3 weeks later, my supervisor called me into her office at the hospital. Several colleagues had apparently expressed anxiety about their own babysitting arrangements after hearing about my situation through the staff gossip network. She asked if I'd be willing to speak at the next staff meeting about childcare vetting and the red flags I'd missed. I agreed immediately, hoping my experience could help other parents avoid similar situations. The meeting happened on a Wednesday morning before shift change. About 30 doctors and nurses crowded into the conference room, most of them parents who looked genuinely worried. I walked them through the whole timeline, starting with Rachel's perfect interview and references. Explained how I'd verified her credentials through the agency, but never called the references myself. Described the gradual pattern of emergencies and unexplained absences that I'd dismissed because Lily seemed happy. Talked about the doorbell camera footage and credit card charges that finally revealed the truth. I focused on specific red flags like Rachel's reluctance to provide detailed daily reports, her tendency to take Lily places without asking permission first, and the way she'd isolated me from other parents who might have noticed inconsistencies. Several people took notes and asked questions about background check services and camera systems. One nurse admitted she'd been using a babysitter for 6 months who never sent updates during the day. Another doctor said his nanny had multiple family emergencies every month that required schedule changes. They left with concrete action steps and resources. I felt like something good had come from the nightmare if it helped even one family protect their kid better. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday afternoon 3 months after the plea deal. Plain white with a county jail return address and my name typed on a label. Inside was a money order for $200 and a payment receipt showing it came from Rachel's prison account. She'd started her restitution payments. $200 was almost nothing compared to the $9,400 she owed, but seeing that payment gave me unexpected satisfaction. She was being held accountable even while locked up. Every month she'd have to send money knowing it was going to the family she'd betrayed. That felt like justice in a small, tangible way that the sentencing hadn't quite provided. I deposited the check and updated my tracking spreadsheet. At this rate, it would take her 4 years to pay everything back, but I didn't care how long it took. The principle mattered more than the timeline. Ailsa brought up the preschool idea during one of our regular check-ins. She'd been watching Lily for almost 3 months by then, and noticed Lily didn't have much interaction with other kids her age. Suggested a local program that met 3 mornings a week focusing on social skills and early learning through play. I felt my stomach tighten at the thought of trusting another institution with Lily. Ailsa must have seen my face change because she quickly added that she'd be happy to attend the first few sessions with Lily to help with the transition. That offer made the difference. If Ailsa was there, Lily wouldn't be alone with strangers. I told her I'd think about it and look into the program. I visited the preschool the following week, armed with a list of questions that would have seemed paranoid 6 months ago, but felt completely reasonable now. The director met me in her office, a kind woman in her 50s who listened patiently as I explained my situation without going into all the details. She understood immediately and didn't seem offended by my extensive vetting process. She provided a binder with background checks on every staff member, all current and valid. Gave me references from 5 current parents whose kids had been in the program for over a year. Walked me through their security protocols, including sign-in sheets, ID verification for pickup, and cameras in every classroom that parents could access through a secure app. She even offered to let me observe a class session before enrolling Lily. I called all 5 parent references that evening. Every one of them praised the program and the staff, describing consistent, caring teachers who communicated regularly and treated the kids with genuine warmth. One mom mentioned her son had special needs, and the staff had worked closely with his therapists to accommodate him. Another dad said his daughter had been shy and anxious, but blossomed socially after 2 months in the program. By the end of the calls, I felt cautiously optimistic that this might actually work. Lily started the next Monday with Ailsa sitting in the back of the classroom. I dropped them off together, my heart pounding as I watched Lily walk through the door holding Ailsa's hand. The director had assigned Lily to a class with 12 other 4-year-olds and 2 teachers who introduced themselves warmly. I forced myself to leave and go to work, checking the classroom camera app every 30 minutes between surgeries. The video showed Lily sitting close to Ailsa during circle time, gradually moving toward the other kids as the morning progressed. By Wednesday, she was playing at the art table with 2 other girls, laughing as they painted with their fingers. Ailsa had moved to a chair by the wall, present but not needed. Friday marked the end of the first week, and Lily came home chattering about her new friends and the story the teacher had read about a caterpillar. She wanted to go back on Monday. The transition had worked. Ailsa continued attending for another week, and then gradually reduced her time, staying for an hour, then 30 minutes, then just drop off and pick up. Lily handled each step without anxiety. She'd made 3 close friends and knew all the classroom routines. Her cubby had her name on it, and her artwork covered our refrigerator at home. She was thriving in ways I hadn't seen before, showing a confidence and independence that amazed me. Watching Lily bounce back made me realize I was recovering slower than she was. She'd moved forward with the natural adaptability of childhood, while I still carried anger and trust issues that affected my daily life. I checked the cameras obsessively, called Ailsa multiple times during her shifts, and felt my chest tighten every time Lily mentioned a new adult at preschool. Tobias noticed during a coffee break at the hospital. Asked how I was really doing beyond the surface-level responses I gave everyone. I admitted I was struggling more than I'd expected. He suggested I might benefit from talking to someone professionally, the same way Lily had worked with Catalina. The suggestion made sense even though part of me resisted it. I wasn't the victim here. Lily was. But Tobias pointed out that betrayal trauma affects everyone differently, and there was no shame in needing help to process it. He gave me the name of a therapist who specialized in trust issues and trauma. I called her the next day and scheduled an appointment for the following week. The therapist's office was nothing like Catalina's cheerful space. It had neutral colors and comfortable furniture that felt professional but not clinical. She listened as I explained the whole situation with Rachel, my ongoing hypervigilance with Ailsa, and the guilt that kept me awake some nights. She asked good questions about my wife's death and how that loss had affected my ability to trust caregivers. Made connections I hadn't considered between my fear of losing Lily and my difficulty believing anyone could care for her properly. Over the next several sessions, she helped me understand that hypervigilance had served a protective purpose initially, but needed to evolve into healthy caution rather than paralyzing fear. She taught me techniques for managing the anxiety that spiked whenever I thought about Lily being with other adults. Helped me separate reasonable safety measures from obsessive monitoring that was damaging my mental health. The work was harder than I'd expected, but necessary. 4 months after Rachel's sentencing, I woke up one morning and realized I felt different. Lighter somehow. I'd learned to trust Ailsa's consistency and reliability without needing constant proof. Stopped checking the cameras every hour and reduced my check-in calls to once per shift. Lily was thriving in preschool with an expanding social circle and growing independence that filled me with pride rather than fear. The restitution payments arrived monthly like clockwork, a tangible reminder that justice was served. I'd spoken at 2 more hospital meetings about childcare safety and received thank you emails from parents who'd implemented better vetting processes. Life had found a new rhythm that felt stable and healthy. The nightmare with Rachel had transformed into hard-earned wisdom about protecting Lily while still allowing her to grow and experience the world. I'd learned to balance caution with trust, vigilance with peace, and responsibility with self-care. We were both healing, moving forward together into a future that felt secure in ways I hadn't believed possible 4 months ago. Nathan called on a Thursday afternoon while I was reviewing patient charts at the hospital. He told me Rachel's boyfriend had reached out through proper legal channels this time, asking if I'd be willing to accept his personal apology in writing. I agreed, mostly because I was curious what he could possibly say that would matter at this point. The letter arrived 3 days later in a plain white envelope with no return address. He wrote that he'd spent months thinking about his role in everything that happened, even though he hadn't known Rachel was stealing or abandoning Lily. He said he should have questioned where her money came from, why she always had cash for expensive dinners, how she could afford to take him on weekend trips while working part-time. The details made me uncomfortable because they painted a picture of the life Rachel was living with my stolen money, while my daughter sat with strangers. He explained that he'd broken up with Rachel the night of her arrest and hadn't spoken to her since, that he was working with prosecutors as a witness to document her spending patterns. The letter was 3 pages long and felt genuine in a way that surprised me. At the bottom was a $500 check made out to me with a note explaining he felt partially responsible for benefiting from stolen money, even though he didn't know its source. I stared at that check for a long time, not sure how to feel about it. The gesture seemed sincere but also inadequate, like putting a Band-Aid on a wound that needed stitches. I decided to deposit it in a college fund I'd started for Lily the week after Rachel's sentencing, money that would sit untouched until she was 18, and hopefully help her build a future that wasn't defined by what happened when she was 4. Sheila started coming by every Sunday morning with fresh baked goods and offers to watch Lily for short periods when Ailsa wasn't available. The first time she brought cinnamon rolls still warm from her oven, Lily's face lit up in a way that made my chest tight. Sheila had this grandmother energy that filled a gap left by my wife's mother, who lived in Oregon and could only visit twice a year because of her own health problems. She'd sit at our kitchen table and tell Lily stories about her own grandchildren, showing photos on her phone and asking Lily about preschool with genuine interest. I learned that Sheila's husband had died 5 years ago, and her kids lived in different states, that she'd moved to this neighborhood specifically because it felt like a real community where neighbors looked out for each other. She felt terrible about unknowingly participating in Rachel's scheme, even though I'd told her a dozen times she'd done nothing wrong. Watching Lily with her made me realize how much my daughter had been missing that kind of consistent grandparent presence, the unconditional affection and patience that comes from someone who has nothing to prove and all the time in the world to give. I took Lily to visit my wife's grave on a Saturday morning in early November, something I'd avoided during the entire Rachel crisis because I couldn't face telling my wife's memory how badly I'd failed at protecting our daughter. We stopped at a flower shop, and Lily picked out pink roses because she said they looked happy. The cemetery was quiet except for the sound of leaves rustling in the wind and the distant hum of traffic on the highway. My wife's headstone was simple gray granite with her name, dates, and the words, beloved wife and mother, that I'd chosen when I was too numb to think of anything more meaningful. I knelt down and brushed away some fallen leaves while Lily stood beside me holding the roses. I told her stories about her mom, how she'd been excited about becoming a parent, how she'd sung lullabies even when Lily was still in the hospital nursery, how she'd made me promise to always put Lily first, no matter what. The words came easier than I'd expected, and I felt grateful that my wife never had to know how I'd trusted the wrong person, how I'd let someone put our daughter in danger for months without noticing. Lily surprised me by setting down the roses and saying in her small, clear voice that Mama would be proud I caught the bad babysitter. The straightforward wisdom of a 4-year-old cut through all my guilt and self-doubt in a way that months of therapy hadn't quite managed. She was right, and the thought brought both comfort and renewed determination to be worthy of that pride. My wife would have wanted me to protect Lily at all costs, and once I'd finally understood the danger, I'd done exactly that. I'd gathered evidence, involved the right authorities, made sure Rachel faced consequences, and found a better caregiver who actually kept Lily safe. Standing there in the cemetery with my daughter's hand in mine, I felt like maybe I was finally doing right by both of them. The insurance investigator who'd reviewed my credit card fraud claim called me at work the following Tuesday. She told me that Rachel's case had helped them identify a pattern of caregiver fraud happening across the metro area. 3 other babysitters had been flagged for similar suspicious charges at restaurants, entertainment venues, and retail stores during hours they were supposedly working. The investigation had expanded to include multiple families and potentially dozens of victims who'd been paying for childcare while their sitters lived it up on stolen credit cards. She thanked me for being so thorough with my documentation and said my evidence had become a template for how they were approaching the other cases. Knowing that our nightmare was helping protect other families made the whole experience feel slightly less pointless, like maybe some good could come from all the damage Rachel had caused. Officer Daniels stopped by the house one evening to tell me the police department was implementing new protocols for investigating childcare complaints based on lessons learned from Rachel's case. They were training officers to recognize abandonment patterns and take reports more seriously, even when children appeared physically unharmed. He explained that too many cases like ours got dismissed because the kids seemed fine, and parents felt embarrassed about being deceived. The new training would emphasize that emotional harm and breach of trust were serious issues deserving proper investigation. He showed me the training materials they were developing, which included examples from our case with identifying details removed. Seeing Rachel's pattern of behavior laid out in official police documentation made it feel more real somehow, less like something that had only happened to us, and more like a recognized crime that other families needed to know about. 6 months after Rachel's arrest, I got an email from a parents' advocacy group asking if I'd be willing to share my story for a child care safety awareness campaign. They wanted to create educational materials, helping other parents recognize warning signs they might miss, the red flags that seemed obvious in hindsight, but were easy to overlook when you trusted someone. I agreed to participate anonymously, hoping to help other parents avoid the mistakes I'd made. Over the next few weeks, I worked with their team to outline the key warning signs from my experience. Things like unexplained absences, vague explanations about activities, resistance to communication, and unusual credit card charges. They created a checklist and informational brochure that would be distributed through pediatrician offices and daycare centers across the state. Knowing my story might prevent even one other family from going through what we'd experienced made all the pain and embarrassment feel worthwhile. Ailsa and I developed a strong working relationship, built on clear communication and mutual respect over those months. She understood my need for constant updates and complete transparency about where they were and what they were doing. She never complained about my frequent check-ins or the cameras I kept running, or the detailed questions I asked about every activity. I appreciated her patience with my ongoing caution about Lily's safety, the way she'd send photos without being asked and call if plans changed even slightly. We'd established a routine that felt secure and predictable, with consistent schedules and clear expectations that helped both Lily and me feel safe. She treated my hypervigilance as reasonable, given what had happened rather than paranoid or controlling, which made it easier for me to gradually relax my grip and trust her consistency. Lily's preschool teacher pulled me aside after pickup one afternoon to tell me how well-adjusted and confident Lily seemed in class. She said Lily was making friends easily, participating enthusiastically in activities, and showing no signs of the abandonment issues Catalina had worried about initially. The teacher had no idea what Lily had been through with Rachel, which felt like a victory, proof that our early intervention and therapy had worked. Lily was just a normal, happy 4-year-old learning her letters and playing dress-up with her classmates, not a traumatized child struggling to trust adults or form attachments. Watching her skip across the playground toward me with a painting she'd made, I realized we'd actually made it through to the other side of this nightmare mostly intact. The notification arrived on a Tuesday morning through the county corrections portal, a brief automated message that Rachel had been transferred to a work release program for her final 6 months. She'd be allowed to work during the day while returning to custody each night, and her monthly restitution payments were increasing from $200 to $400. The notification also mentioned mandatory parenting classes despite her having no children, which struck me as both appropriate and deeply ironic. I forwarded the email to Nathan without comment, knowing he'd want to track her compliance with the new requirements. He called me back within an hour to discuss something else entirely. his voice carrying that particular energy he got when sharing professional insights. Rachel's case had become a reference point in family court, he explained, with judges across 3 counties citing it when evaluating caregiver negligence claims. Attorneys were using the documented abandonment pattern as a benchmark for what constituted criminal endangerment versus poor judgment. Knowing our nightmare was now protecting other children from similar situations provided a type of closure that went beyond Rachel's conviction and sentence. The criminal justice system had worked, but this felt bigger, like something meaningful had emerged from all the fear and betrayal. Nathan mentioned he'd been approached twice in the past month by lawyers seeking his perspective on childcare cases, and each time he'd emphasized the importance of documentation and taking parent concerns seriously. The ripple effects of what Rachel had done were creating actual change in how courts handled these situations, making it harder for future babysitters to dismiss their responsibilities or manipulate trust the way she had. The following Thursday brought Lily's preschool graduation ceremony, a small event in the school gymnasium with folding chairs arranged in neat rows and construction paper decorations taped to the walls. Parents filled the seats with cameras ready, while teachers herded 20 excited 4-year-olds into position for their performance. Lily wore the purple dress she'd picked out herself, her hair pulled back with butterfly clips, and she kept waving at me from the stage with barely contained energy. The ceremony started with each child receiving a certificate printed on cardstock with their name in fancy letters, and Lily accepted hers with a serious expression that made her look suddenly older. Then came the play about friendship, a simple production where kids took turns saying lines about sharing and being kind and helping each other. Lily played a character who learned to include everyone at recess, delivering her lines with surprising confidence and only forgetting one word. Watching her up there under the bright gymnasium lights, performing for a crowd without hesitation or fear, I realized she hadn't just recovered from Rachel's betrayal. She'd grown stronger through everything that came after, through the therapy sessions with Catalina and the consistent routines with Ailsa, and the security of knowing exactly who would be there when she woke up each morning. The stability we'd built together had given her something solid to stand on, and she was thriving in ways that went beyond simply bouncing back from trauma. After the ceremony ended, we gathered at a local pizza place to celebrate with the people who'd helped us reach this point. Ailsa arrived first, bringing a wrapped present for Lily that turned out to be an art supplies kit she'd been eyeing at the store. Sheila showed up with homemade cupcakes decorated with graduation caps made from chocolate and cookies, fussing over Lily like the grandmother she'd become to us. Nathan came straight from court still wearing his suit, and Tobias made it despite being on call at the hospital, both of them genuinely happy to see Lily so excited about finishing preschool. We crowded around a table meant for 6 people, passing pizza slices and listening to Lily describe every moment of the play in enthusiastic detail. Looking around at these faces, at the people who'd shown up when everything fell apart and kept showing up afterward, I felt something shift in my understanding of what had happened. This nightmare with Rachel had transformed into something else entirely, a painful lesson about resilience and the critical importance of thorough vetting and the surprising power of community support when you let people help. Lily was thriving now with people who genuinely cared about her safety, not just collecting a paycheck or using her as cover for their own activities. I'd learned to balance my protective instincts with the ability to trust again, recognizing that hypervigilance had its place, but couldn't be a permanent state. Rachel's conviction ensured she could never endanger another child the way she'd endangered mine, and that knowledge provided real peace. Life had returned to a new normal that felt actually better than before, built on authentic relationships instead of professional transactions, clear boundaries instead of blind trust, and the hard-won knowledge that we'd survived betrayal and come out stronger together on the other side.